Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest for the afternoon, His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. It's a very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your time this afternoon. And let me start by asking you, Mr. Ambassador, according to reports by senior Hamas officials, talks between the Palestinian movement Hamas and mediators over the ceasefire deal are gaining some momentum, even though and in light of the continued Israeli intensive operations in Gaza. How do you see this recent statement, Your Excellency?
Well, actually, Hamas, since quite some time, is showing a lot of flexibility regarding the offers that are presented to it, whether by Egypt, which is the major facilitator and mediator, or through other instances such as the United States, or even from other areas. However, this has always been met with Israeli rejection at the last minute, because Israel does not have the intention to stop what it's doing. Let's say, and let's make sure for a fact that everybody understands that Israel is committing right now 3 crimes. The first one is the crime of genocide. The second one is the crime of ethnic cleansing. And the third one is the crime of collective punishment by starvation and depriving the Palestinian civilians from water resources and from electricity and from even the money that is necessary to buy anything. So this is the first thing. To add to that, recently the Supreme Court, the Israeli Supreme Court, issued what I consider a scandalous decision in response to a petition submitted to it, demanding that the Israeli government should allow the entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, which is actually a duty and not a favor by the Israelis. According to the international law and according to global conventions during the time of war. But the Israeli Supreme Court ruled that international law does not apply to Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. Actually, it does not apply on Israel, which confirms that even the Israeli judiciary does not recognize that the state is a subject of any provisions of the international law in its criminal practices, as we are seeing. This means that it considers itself a state above the law. Actually, the reality is that it's a pariah state, and it accepts and continues to do so because it's benefiting from the American unconditional support. And accordingly, the government is politicizing the judiciary in this country. And let me put it between brackets. This is the country that always claims and always actually breaks our mind that it is the only democracy in the Middle East. And yet, its government is forcing the judiciary system to issue an illegal ruling saying that Israel is above the international law. So I think that this shows that we are in a really bad situation right now.
Absolutely.
The only one we could maybe depend on the support is Europe and the European Union. However, Europe issues limited condemnation, but they are not even worth, honestly, the ink they are written with. They are merely deaf statements that throw dust in the eyes, as we say. They do not satisfy anyone who is seeking justice. If Europe is serious about its condemnation of the Israeli crimes against the defenseless civilians, or is against the continued violation of international laws, as you mentioned in your intervention when you said that the United Nations is considering Israel in violation of the international law, and everybody knows that. But if Europe is really convinced with Israel breaking the international law, then at the very least it should impose the simplest types of sanctions on Israel to make it feel the seriousness of what it's doing, such as suspending, for instance, the strategic partnership agreement, which is a very important deal to Israel, economic deal, or recalling, for instance, its ambassadors from Tel Aviv for consultation, or any action, any type of action that would prevent Israel from continuing its occupation and expansionist policies. at the expense of the Palestinian people, as we are seeing right now. I think that you and all our viewers have seen the latest aggressions on the Lebanese people and the Lebanese cities, southern cities, claiming that Hezbollah is still having some strongholds there. And this actually indicates once again that most of the European countries are unwilling or at least unable to confront Israel with its crimes, maybe for fear of the Jewish pressures, the Jewish lobby pressures, or the American pressure on Europe, especially that they want to reach an agreement with the United States regarding the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war. So the situation actually is at its utmost difficulty for the Palestinian people, and Israel has succeeded even to continue bombardment until we reach a point where now the Palestinians are starting maybe to turn against Hamas and all the movement of liberation, resistance, because they can't reach Israel. So what they are doing is that they are accusing Hamas of being the reason of all the suffering that they are enduring right now.
Yes. And to further, Mr. Ambassador, to further, add insult to injury, if I may, reports by the United Nations Human Rights Office said and has accused Israel of further violating international law by forcibly displacing the Palestinians and issuing what they've called a mandatory evacuation order for over 10 areas in Gaza since the war resumed against Hamas on March 18th. And this, according to statements from the United Nations, of course, is against international law, and Israel has not taken into account any measure to provide accommodation for the evacuated population or any kind of satisfactory conditions, whether hygiene or nutrition, health or safety, etc. Where is the international community from such a mandatory evacuation order?
Well, as I said, Europe, for instance, the United States will support this and will find a reason why it should support this, and maybe will accuse even Hamas of doing that. Because, as I said, this genocidal war on Gaza is not an Israeli war. This is an American-Israeli war. We have to call things the way they are. This is not just an Israeli war. This is an American-Israeli war, and I insist on using this term. But when it comes to the European, who are the second entity who can pressure Israel, as I said, they do not do anything except condemn with hollow condemnations that does not retain any substance. Because if you really want to condemn, there are steps that you could undertake. And I will just give an example. Just do to Israel what you are trying to do to Russia because it's aggression on the Ukrainian people. This is the same kind of aggression, not to mention that ours is much longer. It has been for 6 or 7 decades that we are suffering from this. And yet Europe is still condemning, and without any real substance to this condemnation. So now we are in front of a situation where we have a pariah state that can go forever unpunished, and not just that, even finding excuse for it to continue its genocide and its ethnic cleansing and forced displacement of the people, or even what they call it voluntary displacement out of Gaza, and they even established a department to do so. And this is in total violation to the international community and to the United Nations. But yet, nobody can do anything because we have to rely on the Security Council, who will always be met with an American veto. So we will not be able to apply the international law on Israel. And we have to continue to exert and put our utmost to come out with diplomatic solutions, because this is the only thing we have. But does Israel understand this, or it wants to understand this? They don't have the minimum of political will to apply anything in order to comply with the international law. They just don't care. Didn't the representative of Israel came out in the United Nations in front of all the countries of the world and read the Charter of the United Nations? What do we expect from a representative of a country? What would his country do if this is the representative? So I believe that trying to find a reason in our talking with Israel will not reach anywhere. Reasoning with Israel will not reach anywhere. Israel will only understand one thing, which is to exert real pressure on it. And this is unfortunately is only in the hands of people who are supplying it with arms, with money, with financial capacities, and with diplomatic coverage. Those are the countries who can do that, and they don't want to do it.
Absolutely. On that note, Your Excellency, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much, sir, for all your time and your insight on today's edition of Arab Affairs.